Jeff Lowenfels is one of the funniest, most entertaining people you'll ever meet. Like us, Jeff's a gardener. He's also a reformed lawyer. Don't you wish there were more of those out there? But at heart, Jeff is a passionate, organic gardener. Jeff was gracious enough to do an interview with me to share some exciting, amazing discoveries about how plants eat by farming nutrients from bacteria in the soil. Now, why is this important for gardeners like you and me to know about? Because, as Jeff will explain, this very process, which takes place in the soil beneath our feet all day, every day, determines the health of plants, from cottonwoods to carrots, all of us, and the earth. So hold on to your garden hats. You're in for a real treat. Now, something you might consider as you watch this video is to jot down what I'm about to tell you. Jeff has written 4 best-selling books, which have become like Bibles for organic growers around the world. Oh, and I'll post links to Jeff's books and other resources for you in the description below.
My name is Jeff Lowenfels, and I live in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've known Marion for a long time. We're both big-time organic gardeners, and it's our passion. That's what we do. So that's what we're doing today.
That's what we're doing today. I've learned recently, because of your books, thank you very much, a relatively new term. And I think, Jeff, if I had my life to do again, I think I would dive into soil science.
Oh, yeah.
So can you help us pronounce rhizophagy?
Well, I say rhizophagy. Now, let me give a little deep background into this. This is a discovery that was made in Australia around 2010. And so the pronunciation that originally associated with the word was an Australian pronunciation. It took me a long time to figure this out. And so that's why sometimes when you hear it on the internet, it's rhizophagy. Or, no, it's rhizo, meaning root, phagy, eating, root eating, rhizophagy. And it was, I say, a 2010 discovery that was made by a group in Australia, and their funding ran out. And so the process and the study was picked up by a gentleman named Dr. James White at Rutgers University, and he and his students have advanced and clarified and applied rhizophagy to the real world. So I know your next question is going to be, what is rhizophagy?
Well, it is, but that also explains why you see so many very extensive videos and teaching sessions with him online. Right.
Exactly.
And I go,
exactly.
Rutgers, really? So
yeah.
Well,
Rutgers, as you know, is responsible for Miracle Grow and a number of other, advances in horticulture. But James, and I encourage you to call him and talk with him, and I'll make the introduction, is just such an incredible. He's like Elaine. He's an unbelievably approachable guy. And when I first started talking to him, I kept saying, "Gee, why aren't people talking about this? This is part of the soil food web." And he said, "I can't get traction." And I said, so that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book for him, just like I wrote Teaming with Microbes for Dr. Elaine. I didn't invent any of this stuff. These great scientists, these gurus of the soil food web have done this stuff. I'm a reporter. And unfortunately, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And so in order to be able to understand it, I got to dumb it down for myself. And if I can understand it, then anybody can understand it. So that's where the book comes from.
Well, and that's the beautiful part of it, is you've taken a very complex topic over the years and wrestled with it, if you will, like trying to knead bread or something, until you get a finished product or that you can understand and that we can understand. So
right.
I know when I started writing my gardening column, you've been writing for what, 40 years?
No, I've been writing for 48, 70, yeah.
I came from a science background, oceanography. So that's what I did. I wrote lab reports. I went, no, I've got to get down to the actual core essence so people can understand this stuff.
Right.
So maybe you could, in Reader's Digest terms, enlighten us so we can understand what the beautiful thing is that goes on beneath our feet.
Well, I think the best way to start this out is to give us sort of a general background of what the soil food web is. Now, everybody knows generally food chains, the little guy eats the bigger guy, eats the bigger guy. And there are lots of those chains in the soil. And every now and then something on one of those chains looks up and says, hey, I can eat that guy, and grabs another chain and connects the chains together into a web. It's basically who eats whom in the soil. And it all starts with the fact that the plant attracts bacteria and fungi to the rhizosphere, that little area right around the roots. And they do it by putting out these exudates, which are all sorts of neat things that contain carbon that bacteria and fungi eat. And so there are lots of them down there in the rhizosphere. Now, in the old pre-rhizophagy soil food web system, the story continued that these bacteria and fungi are there happily eating away, and along come nematodes and protozoa, and they eat the bacteria and the fungi for the carbon that the bacteria and fungi have been collecting from the exudates, and the fungi and bacteria contain lots of other stuff, and a lot of that stuff is pooped out into the soil by the nematodes and the protozoa. Yay! Okay, and so it's in the soil, and then it moves various different ways into the plant root where it feeds the plant. Because the microbes, the bacteria and fungi, put an electrical charge, the eating and chewing, onto these nutrients, and you need an electrical charge for them to go into the cell. That's teeming with nutrients, covers all that kind of stuff. All right, so that's the generalized picture. That's what I call the Dr. Elaine Ingham picture, 2006. That's what the soil food web was. We add in mycorrhizal fungi, which are these special fungi that are attracted, that go into the root and then feed the plant by taking stuff from outside the root and moving it into the root. Okay, so that's mycorrhizal fungi. Well, what these women, and they were basically women in Australia, discovered was that some of these bacteria that are attracted by these exudates are not eaten, but are in fact moving into the very youngest root meristem cells with the thinnest little teeny walls. And they moved in, and that's basically, that's where they left it because they ran out of funding. And so they had these bacteria living inside the cells, moving in those cells, and they called it rhizophagy because they thought that the cell was eating those bacteria and moving them in. Along comes Dr. James White and his students. They continue the study, and this is the model that now exists. Some of the bacteria that are attracted by the exudates smell a wonderful smell, which to them is buttered popcorn. And it's actually butyric acid, which if you have too much of, it begins to smell like vomit. But anyway, it causes these bacteria, these particular bacteria, and a few yeast, but I concentrate on the bacteria, to literally back up against the cell wall in the roots, very thin, and they move through it, into it. Now, not to make things confusing, let's make it really simple. I want you to envision a tofu package. The white outside of the tofu package is the meristem cell wall. And the bacteria attracted by this popcorn smell move through that cell wall of the root into the liquid that surrounds the tofu piece. That liquid represents what we call the periplasmic space. And it's not necessarily liquid, but it's a periplasmic space. It's this little space between the inside of the cell wall of the plant and all the cytoplasm and all the goodies that are in the meat of the plant. So you got this little space, and it goes all the way around the cell. And these bacteria move in there. And when they get in there, the plant cell sprays them with a superoxide that strips off the cell walls of the bacteria that contain nutrients and they are absorbed into the plant, so the plant gets some nutrients from these bacteria. Now, at the same time, the bacteria say, hey, we don't like this. This is not fun. And so they fight back by creating a process that weakens this oxygen stuff that's being sprayed on them. And in the weakening process, what happens is two things. One, the bacteria produce ethylene, which causes the cell to stretch a little bit. And two, the bacteria fix nitrogen inside the plant, inside the cell, and feed the plant. So up to 40% of the nitrogen in a plant can come from these bacteria. Now, how could a few bacteria moving in there cause that? They circulate around, and bacteria multiply every 20 minutes. And so every 20 minutes, you get a bigger batch. They're producing ethylene, they're producing nitrogen. Finally, you get so many of them, after a couple of days, you get so many of them, they back up against the cell wall of the plant. And the ethylene concentration, instead of making the whole cell stretches, makes a little tube stretch out of the cell wall. Now, today, we call that tube a root hair. Root hairs are caused by these bacteria that are in there producing this ethylene. They get so many of them in there, they push into the little tube that's created, and 4, 5, 6 times, there's an explosion from the tip of the growing root hair that throws bacteria into the soil, where they go and regrow their cell walls, replenish their nutrients, and then 2 days later end up repeating the trip again in a new cell at the bottom of the root, called rhizophagy. These particular bacteria create a situation where what we thought was basically a grazing situation. Dr. Lane, the bacteria and everything, they're all eating, and then they're getting eaten. So it's like the plant's a farmer, and it just puts the fertilizer out there, and it gets things going, and then it harvests. This is ranching. So the plant not only farms, it ranches. It takes the sheep, shears off the cell walls, eats a couple of lamb chops, and then puts them back out into the paddock to grow back everything again, other than that lamb chop. And that's what's going on. So it's a whole new part of the soil food web. And it gets even better because these are called endophytic bacteria. And as a result of stumbling into the idea of endophytic bacteria, in order to complete the book and have enough stuff to write about, I decided to take a look at other bacteria that are inside the plant. So that's your quick definition of rhizophagy. These are endophytic bacteria that are moved in from the soil, feed the plant, go back again into the soil, re-nutrify, and go back in again. It's just a beautiful, beautiful system. And the pictures that are there, the reason why Dr. Elaine Ingham never, wasn't able to see this was because the microscopy had not advanced. Today, they have these microscopes that, take little slices, and then you put them all together, and you get it's like an MRI kind of thing. And holy crow, you can see these bacteria. You can see them moving. You can see them multiply. There are some videos that I've been privileged to that you can see them blow out of the, the root hairs. I mean, it's incredible. And what the people at Rutgers have done is developed a series of stains that are able to show you the metabolic activity of these bacteria inside, so that when they're getting sprayed, and when they're spraying back. It's unbelievable stuff. And if you thought you wanted to be a soil microbiologist before, when you read this book, holy crow, this is really, really incredible stuff. So that's sort of the Reader Digest version. But buy the book, folks.
No kidding. It really validates the idea of a community down there.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. I mean, and particularly when you consider the fact that these bacteria are living in a slime. Okay, which is the ultimate community. So you start out with one kind of bacteria. They create this little kind of fuzzy, slimy, and then it ends up attracting other bacteria. So you end up with a real microorganism of tremendous numbers of bacteria. And in order to survive living in that community, some of them have to escape, which is how this rhizophagy starts. Now,
Right.
I like to just sort of stick in here for a second because it's been a real hot topic in the discussions, and I'm beginning to come down on one side versus the other. You know, this idea that there's this worldwide wood web of fungi that talk to each other and everything else. I don't really. That has not been proven. Let's put it that way. But there's no question that individual plants are talking with tremendous numbers of microbes. And there's no doubt there's some conversations going on between plants. It's just a question of whether there's this gigantic thing. So the idea of a community, let's keep it on a smaller scale around that plant root. Oh my God. And it's phenomenal. And the plant can change what it wants. So if it needs a bacteria that might cleate iron or that might round up all of the arsenic in the soil and keep it from going in the plant, it can create an exudate that figures that all out and attracts the right kind of microbe. So you want to have a good basis and a good background of microbes in your soil in order for the plant to be able to call them.
Okay, so that leads me to what is, in Reader's Digest terms, the best way to do that? How to create or help plants create healthy soil? I mean,
Right. And I think you put it the right way. I mean, really, the plant can create the healthy soil for itself as long as there's enough organics and microbes in the soil to be able to provide the nutrients, because that's what the plant's doing. It's priming with these exudates a system it's turning the factory on. Give me food. Boom, here's some exudates. That's the fuel. You know, the mills start running. You run out of fuel, the mill stops. So the plant is using photosynthetic energy and producing that stuff and just generating the stuff it needs. The idea that you need to use a fertilizer is just sort of crazy. What the fertilizer tries to do is
now you're talking chemicals. You're talking about
chemicals. Yeah, chemical fertilizer skips the step of the microbe doing its thing and tries to have a chemical that goes directly into the plant, which causes all sorts of problems. The plant may get fed, but the soil doesn't. And soil structure is every much as important as soil nutrition. And the soil structure comes from all of these microbes pooping and peeing and sliming and moving through the soil in larva stages and creating, burrows and pulling in organic material at night and all that kind of stuff. So
while we sleep. So hence, no deep turning of your soil. Get rid of none
of that stuff. It's all, the microbes do it all, as we always point out. Who fertilizes the redwoods? Who primed that system? It's all automatic. It works by itself. And if you don't mess it up, which is what gardeners do, then you're in a good shape. If you don't mess it up. Now, how do you mess it up? Excessive roto-tilling. Some people would say any roto-tilling, but certainly excessive roto-tilling. Plants can grow in through cement. They can grow through the tarmac in your driveway. They don't need you to roto-till. They'll figure it out. And nobody roto-tills in nature. Not having bare soil, key. So that you're providing nutrient material for the plants. If you mulch with organics, not using chemicals, as we've talked, not using herbicides, all the things that people espouse as organic gardeners. Now, notice that I am not using the word, even though I want to, regenerative. Another big debate that's brewing in the gardening world. It used to be that regenerative was basically organics, plus a little societal help. So not only do you plant organically, but you feed your workers a good meal. You take care of people. You don't discriminate. That was all regenerative. Now it's beginning to get a mixed message. Some people continue that as the message. Others are beginning to glom onto it as a non-defined term like natural. And so you don't roto-till. That means you can use less chemical. That's regenerative in some people's. So we got to be careful about the terms. We're talking organics, I think. At least I am. I'm pretty darn sure you are too.
Right, right.
And we can talk regenerative, but let's make sure we're talking organics.
Exactly. I agree. Let's bust another myth. So, you and I have been on this planet for more than a few decades, and we grew up where people said, okay, you're starting your own seeds. Great. And thou shalt not use any soil from the garden, only use sterile this and sterile that for potting soil and germination mix.
Right.
Whoa, can you explain, can you bust that one for us?
Yeah. So first of all, it's sort of, I can bust it in several different ways, which would probably take way too much time. But the bottom line is this. Let's start with the seed. The seed itself contains bacteria that are necessary for the growth of the plant. And these are endophytic bacteria. They get into the plant. They're trapped in the flower in the seed making process. And so they're in that seed. And so you got to have those. So you don't want to sterilize the seeds. We know that for sure. The soil contains additional bacteria that are creating soil structure along with fungi as well, but B, feed the plant as we've discussed. And so if you're using sterile soil, you've got to rely on just what's in that seed. That may be good for a day or two, but what happens the rest of the week? What happens for the 21 days it takes? For a sweet pea to whatever. And so you've got to have you need to have microbes in the soil to continually feed that seedling in a natural way. And that's just the bottom line. And if you use sterile soil, you're only going to be relying on the stuff that's in the seed. It'll grow, but it won't grow as well.
So you're talking about even before the seed germinates, the seed starting mix still needs to have some organics in it to feed it. Okay, so that's interesting because I know people
it will grow. Things will grow in sterile soil. They just won't grow as well.
Okay, so that explains why some very pronounced organic gardeners that I know will actually soak seeds in like kelp water, comfrey mix water. So it's not just what the seed is containing inside. It needs help even in that whole germination process.
Sure. I mean, you put a seed in sterile soil, it'll germinate, but how long will it continue to grow? You gotta have some food. Yeah, everything in a plant. This is one of the reasons why I really enjoyed writing Teeming with Nutrients, because it's really about how things get in the plant and what happens inside the plant. Everything that is in the plant, other than that original seed material, the plant makes. I mean, they put the molecules together. They put the atoms together. Goodness gracious, you gotta have a lot of stuff there to be able to supply that stuff. So let's take nitrogen alone. Nitrogen is the basis of enzymes, and enzymes are what make the world work. In each plant cell, there's something like 10,000 different kinds of enzymes in each plant cell, and there's probably 1,000 of each one of those 10,000 different kinds inside this teeny little cell, and every one of them was put together by the plant. Holy camoly! Yeah, it's too mind-boggling.
Now you bring in the seed, and the plant in creating that seed. Think of the material in it.
Oh, it's phenomenal, and it gets even crazier. One of the things that I discovered, obviously other people have discovered it, but I discovered for myself, is that those seeds are really where the heirloomness of things come from. So If you take a cannabis seed, a land race, that's what they call, these things that have been bred for thousands and thousands of years, the same plant, same seed, same plant. If you take that, it's got the necessary bacteria in it to make the kind of cannabis that you want to grow, or a tomato plant. So you develop an heirloom, you grow the same thing time again. It's the bacteria in it that make it the heirloom. A corn plant that's 400 years old, the variety, will have the same kinds of bacteria and mix of bacteria that the plant had 400 years ago. Whoa.
It's a mind bender. It really is. And also it makes you realize you don't want to have treated seeds.
You don't. You don't. Treated seeds is a silly idea unless and we're going to get there, unless the treated seed is treated in a way, and probably with bacteria, that somehow enhances what's going on, becomes an endophytic bacteria or something of that sort. All the bad companies, as we like to say, the Bayers of the world, the Monsantos and all the folks that have done all sorts of evil stuff with chemicals, they're all looking into teaming with bacteria, because they're all going to be coming up with products that you can literally put on the plant, that goes in the plant to feed the plant from inside, to kill a fungi from the inside, et cetera, et cetera. It's mind-boggling what's going on, and hopefully this will be the end of the chemical era. We won't need fertilizers. We'll be able to spray our fields with a little spray of bacteria, and lo and behold, it'll end up feeding it. It'll jump into the wheat plant. Dr. James told me about a patent, there for things that bacteria that jump off the plant, like grass, into the soil, kill the dandelion, and then go back into the plant again. Oh, give me that. So there's some really fun stuff out there that's going to be happening as a result of this stuff. And as always happens when you write a book, as teaming with bacteria, a lot of the stuff that you talk about in the book comes true. So there are a number of things that have been discovered that are mentioned in the book that are making people really sit up and pay attention. Trichomes. Let's not use cannabis this time. We'll use cannabis, but there are trichomes on lots of different kinds of plants. Those trichomes contain bacteria. Those bacteria are doing somewhat of the same thing that they do inside the root. They produce nitrogen. And in order to produce nitrogen, you need an oxygen-free environment. Remember rhizobia? Yeah. Okay. So rhizobia in legumes are, the bacteria, they go in there, they form that nodule, or they cause the plant to form the nodule so that they can have hemoglobin, no oxygen in there. And so the cannabis plant, for example, sprays the bacteria in order to give it a oxygen-free environment with cannabinoids, flavonoids, and terpenes. Oh, okay. Now we know what those are really for. So, and the reason why tomatoes smell the way they smell, when you rub your hands up and down, there's a volatiles coming out. Those are produced by bacteria. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
It is. You know what? It also resonates hope.
Yeah.
The unfolding of what's really going on, and hopefully greed won't take place, but it'll be for the benefit of all, because there's no reason that we have to have food shortages and people starve and you have to store things in silos, and there's the haves and the have-nots and the hungry and the starving and the people who are overweight. So,
well, in addition to which, I mean, let's face it, if people had a choice, they'd go organic. The most evil person in the world would go organic if they thought that organic was going to be able to feed the world. The reason why we aren't organic all around the world is because we've been convinced by corporate culture that no, you can't feed the world with organics. Well, maybe we can.
We can. I love it. So, and I love you too. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk soon.
And give Jude a big hug. Yeah.
Will do.
Okay.
Marty too. Okay.
Blessings.
You
Bye.
bet. Bye.
Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interview enlightening, somewhat entertaining, and educational. So I'm curious, how will you take what you learned today and apply it to your gardening efforts tomorrow? Think about it, and please post your thoughts in the comments below, and that way we can all benefit. Meanwhile, I'll see you in the garden. Cheers!